In 2017, Justice League was released in a compromised state after Zack Snyder stepped away from the project and Joss Whedon was brought in to finish it. What followed was some of the most organized and persistent fan campaigns in modern internet history. The #ReleaseTheSnyderCut movement began as a grassroots effort to restore Snyder's original vision, what many believed was a darker, more coherent version of the film that had been buried by studio interference. The subreddit r/SnyderCut became the central hub for that push, uniting fans around a clear and simple goal: let Zack finish what he started. Against all odds, it worked. In 2021, Zack Snyder's Justice League premiered on HBO Max, running 4 hours long and fully embracing the tone and structure that Snyder had envisioned from the beginning. It was an unprecedented win for the online fandom. The campaign had delivered real results, proving that organized digital pressure could sway a major studio. But in 2025, 4 years later, with James Gunn preparing to launch an entirely new DC universe and Superman just days from release, the subreddit still hasn't moved on. What was once a space for rallying around a cause has turned into something else, a forum suspended in time, clinging to a version of the franchise that is dead and no longer exists. The posts now aren't about celebration or appreciation. They're about sabotage, conspiracies, and control. To me, this is the saddest subreddit on the entire internet, and that's saying a lot. The current state of r/SnyderCut is best summed up by a recent post calling for an organized sabotage of Superman 2025. What makes this post most notable isn't the strategy being proposed, but the fact that James Gunn actually took the time to respond to it. His reply didn't defend the movie or challenge the post directly, instead he just mocked it. That shift in tone from public pressure to open dismissal really shows how far the subreddit has fallen from its peak influence. The title of this post is "Stand Up and Fight for the Snyderverse on July 11th, and it's by a user named TrickyFood5757. It says, "Fight for our Snyderverse on the Imposter Superman release day. Here's what we can do to make a difference. 1. Post spoilers everywhere. People are less likely to see or enjoy the movie if it's already spoiled. 2. Leave bad ratings on review sites. We know for sure gun bots will post fake positive reviews, so we must let people know the truth and balance the bias out with realistic scores. 3. Reserve tickets online but don't complete the purchase. By selecting and reserving tickets, it gets taken out of the pool for a period of time, which means this has a chance of stopping gun bots from buying tickets. Gunn fired the first shot and killed the Snyderverse, and here's our chance to take the fight back to him. #Restore the Snyderverse. If we can't have our Superman, no one can." James Gunn responded to this by saying, "Lol, I think we'll survive. I'm not sure the 8 people that listen to that guy, I'm going out on a limb and guess it's a guy, are going to impact the course of events." The tactics listed in this subreddit post reflect a complete misunderstanding of how audiences engage with blockbuster films. Spoilers and review bombs don't derail a release. Like, there are so many dog shit movies that make a ton of money at the box office. Like, that's just how it is. Even if the reviews are negative, like, people really don't care that much. Coordinated ticket hoarding doesn't create financial damage in any meaningful way. Like, that's just not how buying tickets online work. I have to assume a caveman wrote this because any normal person just knows that that's not how online ticket sales work. These are attempts to feel in control of a situation that moved on without them. They're a symptom of a group that no longer has any clear goals or things to strive for beyond the very big blanket goal of restore the Snyderverse. It's also funny to me how, like, the tone of the post frames Gunn as this hostile figure, as if directing a reboot amounts to personal sabotage and a personal attack on this guy. He refers to him as someone who fired the first shot, and recasts a business decision as an act of war. This level of dramatization suggests that some of these users aren't defending a creative vision anymore, they're defending an identity that has no place in the current direction of DC.
But wait, there's more!
Now, this post actually got the attention of the mods on r/SnyderCut, and I have my own issues with the mods on here, and I will talk about that later in the video, but for now, I just wanted to read out the statement that they put out, just to kind of show how they reacted to this entire situation. Here's the post. It says, Statement from our staff about the recent post getting social media attention. Over the weekend, someone made a post on this subreddit suggesting that people do dishonest and questionable things with respect to an upcoming movie's release. The post was made early on the morning of Saturday, June 14th at 2:10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time by an infrequent poster to the sub. It was seen and removed by one of our moderators about 2 hours later, before 4:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The post had garnered few replies and 0 upvotes, with no one else endorsing what it said. We later learned this post was screenshotted and shown on other social media platforms. We deleted it long before we knew that had happened. Our staff never approved that post and does not endorse what it said. This is a public sub, where posts do not have to be pre-approved. The mere appearance of a post on our sub does not represent any endorsement by us. Our moderators delete posts after they are made if they violate any of our policies or Reddit's policies. There was never any question that this post violated our policies, both explicitly and needed to be immediately removed. This post wasn't so much controversial as it was universally disapproved of. We support everyone's right to vote with their wallets by choosing not to see a movie, but we do not support any dishonesty or manipulation aimed at stopping someone else from choosing to see a movie. The link to the original removed post is here, where anyone can confirm that we removed it, as well as the time it was removed. Using the mouse to hover over the date timestamp on the desktop version of Reddit shows the exact time our comment confirming the removal was made. Here's a post by a user named TheDramaKing04, and the post goes as follows. Is James Gunn sabotaging Matt Reeves' Batman, so he has to choose between merging both universes or having his projects cancelled? To me, this post reads like fanfiction mixed with corporate espionage. It suggests that James Gunn is playing 4D chess to force Matt Reeves, who is a critically acclaimed filmmaker who's made one of the most successful recent Batman films, into submission. And it's not framed as like speculation, but instead suspicion. It's the perfect example of how parts of the Snyder fandom have drifted away from just liking a filmmaker's vision and into QAnon-style logic where every delay or creative decision is part of a sabotage plot. Instead of just confronting and dealing with the fact that WB has no plans whatsoever to restore the Snyderverse, they invent narratives where James Gunn is actively destroying rival projects like he's a James Bond villain. But to me, what's more interesting than this post is how revealing the comments section is. Nearly every single reply is deleted, and the mod team swoops in repeatedly. Removed for trolling or mocking the sub. Removed for being off topic. Removed for being a meta post. This is a place where even questioning the narrative is treated like heresy.
Heresy!
Any outside commentary, even if it is respectful or satirical, is scrubbed immediately. It's, at this point, not even a discussion forum, it's a purity test. Another post by user Dark Atheris is titled Wake Up, and it's a meme where the top panel is Superman and Krypto, and it says they feed us poison. The middle is the Fantastic Four, and it says so we buy their cures, and the bottom panel shows Zack Snyder's Justice League villains, and it says while they suppress our medicine. The meme is unintentionally hilarious, and part of me thinks it's very much satire, but if it isn't, it's still hilarious. It repurposes classic Big Pharma conspiracy rhetoric, the kind of stuff you'd see on a Facebook anti-vax group, and it applies to superhero movies. The message is clear. Zack Snyder's work is the medicine, and everything else is a lie. Marvel is poison. Gunn's Superman is poison. Reeves' Batman, I think poison. Like, Snyder fans have started to kind of like adopt the Batman into their like whole Snyderverse thing for some reason. I don't know. It's really confusing, but they're shifting the goalposts, and the Snyder Cut is the cure that they don't want you to have. It's the kind of post that you would expect to see in a satire subreddit like r/DC Comics Circle Jerk or something, but here it's pinned as a semi-ironic warning, I think. And once again, when users try to push back, the mods have to step in. Removed for being negative about Zack Snyder. Not off topic, not abusive, just not sufficiently reverent. This is a subreddit where objectivity is a bannable offense, and if you don't worship the altar of Snyder, you're not welcome. And that, to me, is exactly why this community has become culturally irrelevant. They're not here to talk about film anymore, they're here to preserve a myth. Here's a post by user DarkTower41, and it says, "Why a weaker Superman? Emasculating Superman for political correctness? Pandering to toxic nostalgia fandom gone wrong, or a torture porn of Superman by James Gunn? Love it or hate it, but from all the new trailers of Superman, one can't deny that this Superman seemed to be getting a good beating from everyone, including his own dog." This Superman seems to be most laughably weakest Superman we have ever seen. Has Gunn nerfed him to Kingdom Come in a desperate act to humanize him, physically and emotionally to please the nitpicky fans who used to complain about Superman being too much godlike in the Snyder movies? Has pandering to these hypocritical, toxic, and nostalgic-driven fans and the blind bandwagoning, unimaginative fans that follow him compromise James Gunn's Superman into super meh? Or is this another Hollywood's attempt in emasculating and ruining another strong heterosexual masculine male character like Superman for present political correction movement? Or is this James Gunn being James Gunn and making a PG-13 softcore torture porn of Superman?
Who the fuck starts a conversation like that? I just sat down.
In a follow-up post with even more broken English, Dark Tower 41 again posted about this bizarre complaint by stating, "Why are James Gunn and WB Studios deliberately emasculating the new Superman visually, physically, and emotionally? It's crazy that David Cornsweet is 6'4", but James Gunn has made him look physically smaller and weaker than Henry Cavill, who is 6'1". Even his character Superman, known for his cool and calm mannerisms, seems emotionally, mentally weak and immature when facing basic questions from his lover, Lois Lane. Visually, his costume comes off as cheap and almost as a half-decent cosplay costume that needs work. Even his posture, when he crashes on the ground, his body posture is silly and comical compared to Henry's Superman. But why? For a few silly laughs? Is he Superman or the silly plastic man? For a new Superman that's supposed to be brighter and hopefully, he hardly smiles, an endless criticism which Henry's Superman faced till today. But when in reality and fact-checked, it appears that even Gunn's Superman fails to crack a smile in certain scenes. Is Hollywood emasculating the symbol of male masculinity, strong alpha male characters to please the ever-changing woke social culture, woke culture? Or is James Gunn inability to write a mature, sensible movie without his usual silly and goofy writing on a masculine character like Superman being reflected here and is coming off as beta male Superman?
You're a stupid dumbass.
These posts frame James Gunn's Superman not as creative reinterpretation, but as political and cultural offense. The user treats the character as a fixed standard of masculine strength and reacts strongly to any signs of vulnerability, humor, or emotional openness. Because, men aren't allowed to be vulnerable or funny or be emotionally open. The focus is not on story direction or cinematic choices, but on the idea that Superman, in a movie that hasn't been released yet, has been downgraded from an ideal into something less powerful and less serious. The tone is accusatory, with Gunn portrayed as someone who deliberately weakened the character to please outside groups. The fixation on David Cornsweet's height compared to Henry Cavill's just shows how superficial these concerns really are. The idea that Gunn somehow made a taller actor look smaller is not based on visual reality, but just how it works in the movie. Like, do you want Lois Lane to be at his chest when they're talking face to face? They did this with Thor and Natalie Portman, and you don't see this guy complaining. The fact that posture and costume details are used to support the argument shows how much of the concern is rooted in surface level presentation rather than the actual material present in the film. What really drives the outrage is the fear that Superman is being humanized at the cost of traditional masculinity. Because again, Superman never acts like a human. He has to be stoic at all times. The poster repeatedly describes the character as being weak, mentally immature, and emasculated, particularly in the emotional scenes with Lois Lane. Any sign of self-doubt or emotional vulnerability is treated as evidence that the character has been corrupted. Because again, Henry Cavill was never emotional or vulnerable around Lois Lane. Surely that's never been a thing that ever happened in his movies. Or even in the comics. Superman has never been comforted by Wonder Woman and break down sobbing. That's never happened before, guys. This is only a James Gunn thing. The user just assumes that it reflects a wider political agenda from James Gunn, who's accused of appeasing the woke culture and betraying what the poster sees as Superman's rightful identity as an Andrew Tate alpha male figure.
I like your Andrew Tate costume.
Don't fucking talk to me, idiot.
The underlying flaw, of course, in this line of thinking is the belief that masculinity and emotional depth cannot coexist. This is contradicted by not just James Gunn's upcoming portrayal, but by decades of Superman canon. Superman has had moments where he expresses grief, frustration, love, and self-doubt. He mourns, he fails, and he questions himself. These emotional moments do not diminish his strength. They give it context. The idea that a Superman who cries or takes a beating is somehow less masculine ignores what the character has always been about. Superman's power is not defined by how invincible he is, but it's by how he chooses to carry the weight of that power. He uses it for good, and for the good of humanity. In order to understand humanity, you have to be human, and I would go as far as to argue that Superman is very human. In fact, that's what makes Superman so great. These posts don't function as film criticism. Instead, they use the language of cultural grievance and culture war bullshit to push the idea that the new Superman fails because he doesn't conform to a rigid, outdated ideal of strength. In place of nuance, the poster builds a conspiracy where studio decisions are guided entirely by ideology. Has that happened in the past? Of course, I'm not denying that. But the result is not an analysis of Superman's role in storytelling, but a personal reaction to the loss of a character who once served as a symbolic protector of a worldview. What emerges is less about the film itself and more about how this audience's processes change, softness, and difference. Recently, James Gunn made some comments addressing these concerns. He stated, quote, "I see the online things. Who would beat whom? Homelander or Superman or fucking whatever." And I'm like, this is the fucking stupidest fucking conversation. So then whoever would win this fight means they're the best? Because I'll go out and write Godman who can destroy you with a wink. But I didn't want a Superman who could punch planets. So he's a little less powerful. As someone who hates power scaling and even recently made a video about how it's anti-art, shameless plug, go and check that out, I think this is the best way to address Superman as a character from a writer's perspective. Gunn's response cuts through a conversation that has unfortunately dominated fandoms for years, one that treats characters less like people and more like statistics on a trading card. The idea that a character's value hinges on how powerful they are in combat strips away everything that makes stories matter. Superman's appeal has never been rooted in how many planets he can punch. It's in the choices he makes, the responsibility he carries, and the emotional cost of his role. Gunn's decision to scale back Superman's power is not a downgrade, but a narrative tool that upgrades the character. It allows Superman to struggle and to grow and to face situations where strength alone isn't the answer. This approach rehumanizes Superman, and for a character who is often misunderstood as being a god or a symbol of perfection, giving him room to be imperfect is what brings him back to life. Reddit user Spock Yoda made the following post on the Snyder Cut subreddit stating, "Can someone just use Google VEO3 and create Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3 for us? Isn't that too much to ask for? Maybe give us the Batflick movie in VEO3 as a bonus so I can die happy." In my opinion, this shows how far some fans are willing to go to revive the Snyderverse, even if it means using tools that were never designed for that purpose. AI video generators like VEO3 can create short clips, but they are nowhere near capable of producing full-length feature films with characters, performances, and structure that makes sense. Beyond the technical limitations, the legal issues are more than substantial. Generating entire films based on DC characters with their likenesses and storylines without studio approval would violate copyright law. The fact I even need to explain this is insane. Major studios are already suing companies like Midjourney and Stability AI for training on their content. Using those same tools to recreate Snyder's films would fall into the same category of unauthorized use. The desire to see these stories continued is understandable, but AI is not a loophole. It doesn't solve the rights issues, and it doesn't replace the creative labor that made these films possible in the first place. Some fans continue to hold out hope that Netflix could acquire the rights to Snyder's version of the DC universe, but this outcome is extremely unlikely. Rebel Moon, Snyder's latest project, was very poorly received and underperformed for Netflix despite a major marketing push. The financial and critical failure of that series weakens any argument for giving Snyder more high-budget IP. On top of that, most of the original cast is either uninterested or unavailable. Henry Cavill has moved on, Ray Fisher has publicly distanced himself from Warner Brothers, and Ben Affleck has shown no interest in returning for the role. Ezra Miller remains a legal and PR liability, and Gal Gadot's public support for Israel has made her a controversial figure that many studios would rather not involve in high-profile projects right now. Jason Momoa is being Lobo, and that looks fucking awesome, so I'm cool with that. Even if Netflix wanted to pursue it, the cost of licensing DC's characters would be enormous. Warner Brothers has made it clear they are moving forward with James Gunn's reboot, and have very little incentive to let a competing studio revive a discarded continuity. The logistics, cast, budget, and brand alignment all point in the same direction. The Snyderverse is over, and no major platform is in a position to bring it back. The most realistic path forward for fans who still care deeply about Snyder's vision would be to push for a comic continuation. I would love to see this. DC has precedent for this. Batman '89 picked up right where the Burton films left off, and it gave fans closure through a format that respects the original tone and direction without the financial burden of film production. A well-written comic series could allow Snyder or his collaborators to explore their planned storylines in a controlled, affordable medium. It would not require securing actors or negotiating studio deals or overcoming logistical barriers tied to live action. Snyder clearly has a love for Alex Ross, one of my all-time favorite comic artists, and I personally would love to see them team up to make a Snyderverse continuation where it's Justice League 2 and 3, maybe even a Batfleck thing, and it's done in that style with Alex Ross doing either cover art or doing the whole art for the stories. That would be incredible, and I would love that personally. If Snyder fans redirected their efforts toward advocating for a comic continuation, they might actually have a tangible shot at seeing the rest of the story told in a form that preserves what they loved about it in the first place, rather than just trashing the current output of DC in hopes that the film bombs and Gunn decides to just restore the Snyderverse anyways, which is not happening. People have said that I'm a James Gunn fanboy and that I hate Zack Snyder, but that's not really true. I love DC and I love the characters and the comics, and to me, I just want to support whatever output DC decides to go with. If it sucks, it sucks. I'll call it out. But I just think that, relying too much on the past and wishing they could bring it back is just a waste of time. It really is. And so I have to ask then, is this the natural end of all fan campaigns? The Snyder Cut subreddit began as a focused movement with a clear goal. It succeeded, against all odds, in getting Zack Snyder's Justice League released. But once that goal was met, the energy really just fractured and disappeared. What remains is a community that's defined less by advocacy and more by fixation. The original purpose has faded, and now it's replaced by conspiracy and gatekeeping and complete disillusionment. To me, this subreddit shows how easily fan movements can shift from collective action to ideological shitholes. What began as a push for creative recognition became a closed system where criticism is banned, outside perspectives are dismissed, and reality is constantly reframed to keep hope alive. The language has changed from support to resentment, and the conversation has drifted far from filmmaking and into personal identity, culture wars, and control. It's fair to feel some sympathy for these people. They built a connection with these characters and this director's vision, but it's also worth asking whether that attachment has been allowed to harden into something unhealthy. When fandom turns into isolation, when every new creative direction is seen as an attack, and when technology or sabotage are viewed as solutions, concern becomes the more honest response. The Snyderverse isn't coming back, but something deeper is being held on to, and that's what this really sad subreddit reveals. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. If you're new to the channel, I'm currently working on a Superman retrospective series where I talk in depth about each and every live-action Superman film. My video on the first Christopher Reeve movie is out now, so go and check that out next. I'll include it here at the end screen. Huge thanks to our channel members for making videos like these possible, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.